response, and that is your emotional response. You can get mad. You're entitled to in this second part, this 2A assignment. You can get upset here and discuss your problems, but I also want you to read these two very, very brief reviews and kind of compare and contrast them in a way. One's positive, as I said, and one's negative. Why? What approach does each one take? I give you much more detailed descriptions, and I'll go over this in greater detail below. But essentially, you really want to think about what's important. There are lots of pieces of information in this report, Academically Adrift, and your task, truly, is to sort out the argument that's being made. This is very different from what the text is about. This is something I'm going to harp on. Thesis, the argument, the findings, and their interpretation are one thing. What a given piece of writing is about is something entirely different and much easier. It's much easier to discover the subject than the argument. You are going to have to repeatedly focus on finding and restating an article's argument. In reality, this is the most important skill whenever you read a scholarly article. That one sentence. And it is not a quote. You will hear me say over and over again that I want you to paraphrase, put it in your own words rather than quote. Quoting it's not really too easy, but it's not writing. Quoting is not writing. It's quoting. You're simply copying someone else's words. Quotes should be used extremely sparingly, and I'm really restricting you here in the beginning to paraphrasing, because paraphrasing will really tell me whether you understand what you've read or not. Quoting, you don't have to understand a thing to quote it. You just have to copy and paste it. And that is the problem. If you paraphrase something and paraphrase it correctly, I know that you have understood what you've read. And this is an important ability to get into. Taking someone else's argument, kind of digesting it, synthesizing it, and restating it in a reduced or summarized shorter form. This is an invaluable skill that will serve you throughout the rest of college. Now, if you're one of those people that put this off till your final semester of your senior year or close to it, that's a pity, because students typically tell me they wish they had had this course much earlier in their curriculum in college, because the great thing about this course is not only is it devoted entirely to what you're studying, it will give you tools that you can use pretty much for any piece of writing you do in your discipline in graduate school. It's very useful. It's not simply contained in this course, and that's how it was designed. I may have mentioned before that I am on a committee that helped to design this course in this way. I've taught it for a number of years this way, essentially. And so it is your discipline, it is your major that you will be reading about and researching and writing about. But all disciplines that appear in the course, all of them must be able to read these kind of articles and be able to put their central points into their own words. So, Academically Adrift Part 2A, you'll see the two attachments that are reviews. And you'll be asked to, on the one hand, analyze them in around 200 words and discuss the contents. What is the difference between them? How did they approach the book in question? Which of the two did you find most compelling and why? Provide relevant examples from the reviews. Now, this is the last assignment we're going to do with regard to Academically Adrift. It's not the last time we're going to talk about it, because depending on your responses, I'm going to do another, probably a podcast or a screencast, where I discuss what I was really looking for here and why. And I'm going to give you kind of some finer points about this text, but I don't want to say any more than that. Read it critically, read it carefully, and understand that there's nothing malicious in my giving this to you. All will become clear. So, the third part of this assignment is a discussion board post, where you just get to rant on discussion board to each other about what you thought of this report. And if you read it with any care at all, it should upset you. It upset me. But in 150 words, giving your personal reaction to the findings. How did you feel when you understood what the authors were implying? Why do you think I insisted that you hold your opinion in check until now? Why would I do that? I think I've already given you that hint. How did reading the reviews change the way you felt about the report? Then later in the week, after that initial rant, respond to 2 of your classmates' posts. I give you word counts for virtually everything because I really would prefer it. That's about how long it takes to really do this correctly. In that response, addressing how your reaction to the material was similar or different from theirs. Please be respectful. Be sure to put the name of the person to whom you're responding in the subject line. This is so when I'm grading it, I realize the way Blackboard sorts these, I can do them by threads or by people who post. And so that information just allows me to kind of get a handle on who's responding to whom. Okay. Then we get to researching the university's databases. As I've mentioned, that assignment description is very detailed. Let's look at it. Okay, here's the assignment description. It's called Researching the University's Databases. And this assignment requires you to do 2 things. Become familiar with peer-reviewed sources in your discipline and become accustomed to searching for them in one or more of the databases available online via the J.D. Williams Library webpage. You're going to get real familiar with this. As I mentioned before, all the writing you do in the course, you must use only academic and or peer-reviewed sources. They're generally articles written by university scholars in the various academic disciplines, professors in accounting, professors in communication sciences, professors in education. The articles are written by scholars for scholars and concern themselves with the problems and concerns that those in the discipline consider important at present. In other words, what are people in your discipline, the academics in your discipline, your professors, worried about? What's coming down the pipeline? What problems are there theoretically and in terms of the education and academic concerns of your discipline? The articles in question typically present arguments about these discipline-specific issues, engaging in a logical, methodical discussion with their peers. While I use the term argument, you must understand that in academic circles there is often, but not always, little heat or emotion to these arguments. These are not Jerry Springer-style rants by any means. It is usually a gentle, deliberate debate among people of mutual regard and equivalent expertise. In fact, often you will have to read quite closely to discover just where scholars differ in their views. In these mildly academic writings, these scholars frequently employ terms and concepts known only to those who, like themselves, are experts in their discipline. This language is different from one area of study to another. The lingo, the terminology. Popular or general audiences do not read these articles and would be unlikely even to understand them because of the specialized language the articles use. Collectively, this ongoing discussion among scholars is called discourse, and that's a fancy word. Don't let it scare you. It's just a cognate or a related word. It's related to the word discussion, as evidenced by its somewhat similar sense and sound. These 2 words come from the same root. In essence, discourse is just a fancy academic or scholarly way of describing This exchange of ideas and writing among professors and researchers at various universities and colleges, not just throughout the U.S., but also throughout the world. And you may, in fact, use sources from Australia, England, Europe. That's allowed. You too should begin thinking of yourself in this way. You're a student of higher learning in your area of major study. You're a scholar in your own right. When you enter the databases to begin your search for this assignment, depending on the database in question, and there are discipline-specific databases, really you just need to explore. This is not something I can tell you how to do step 1, step 2, step 3. It varies by discipline. And there's about 20 routes to the same end. You must ensure, however, that the sources you search for and locate are scholarly, academic, peer-reviewed. These are all essentially the same thing. You have to check that box. The delimiters, as I mentioned. In essence, you will begin to think of delimiters as we become more focused on the different issues, and eventually you'll whittle it down to one that you will consider for the rest of the semester. It's the difference between using a club or a blunt instrument to find something and using a scalpel. The delimiters and the search terms you employ on the database websites will, if done well, get the hits for only things that really are devoted to your discipline and the issues under consideration. This is a skill. It takes practice. Please don't do yourself the disservice of putting out to the last minute. You cannot do this in 5 minutes, period. Please don't try. Or if you do, understand that it won't come out well. In fact, if I could, I can't really grade you or assess you on this, but you really need to just kind of go on the databases and play around. Put some search terms in related to your discipline or something you're interested in and see what comes back. This little assignment, however, simply asks you to 1. List the search terms you entered and what happened next. Describe the step-by-step process you go through and what you find. I put in communication sciences and disorders in quotation marks because that's several words, and if you don't do it that way, the databases will look for communication as one term, sciences as another, and disorders as a third, and you won't get anything related to the actual field of communication sciences and disorders. These are fine points. They're Boolean operators. You may already know this. Typically in Google, if you've got a 2-word search term, you put quotations around it so that the box looks for those 2 terms together rather than separately. You should list the number of scholarly articles your search returns. And by this I mean a number. But you gotta have checked that box. It's very important. It will likely be high. This is to show you that there is a lot of scholarly writing in your discipline. There's a lot of scholarly writing in everybody's discipline, I promise. And if you don't get any hits, I hate to say it, but it's something that you're doing wrong. Okay. Then, 3rd, provide at least 3 complete sentences, each of which describes 3 different topics of discussion that you have seen in your discipline on the university databases. So, search terms you entered, how many hits you got, 3 different topics that you see. What debates are ongoing? These are things to consider. What are people in your discipline worried about? What issues or problems are they discussing? Usually a review of an article's title, its subject terms, and its abstracts are enough to get an idea of the subject matter discussed. That is all you have to submit. However, if you do it correctly, you'll realize that the journey of the search is the most important thing about this assignment. This is practice. We will spend lots of time in the databases this semester, this summer, and so this exercise is intended to get you familiar with the databases, how they work, and how to do research using them.